because it kind of makes you wonder about what defines faith, what makes a person a leader in faith, because obviously Daniel is impersonating the priest, but at the same time he's proving to be a very effective one. What fascinated me was really about, you say it's inspired by real events instead of based on a true story. What made you decide to say inspired by a true story?
Well, it's inspired rather than based on, because we were sort of the scriptwriter for Corpus Christi wrote 8 years ago. He wrote an article for the newspaper about the actual case of an imposter, of a guy who pretended to be a priest in a small community in central Poland for like 4 months before he was just like uncovered, right? Mm-hmm. So, and he was the moment he wrote the article, he was approached by a producer who wanted to buy the rights for the article from Mateusz, from the scriptwriter, and he said, well, I'm gonna try and write the script myself. And he did it. It was his first script, supervised by the producer, and then they sent it to me. And then I started, I read it. It was very, interesting, compelling. I had my notes, so I in the first script already there were some themes that weren't there in the original story. For example, Juvenile detention center, or the accident. But they were smaller, they were minor things in the story. I asked them to make them bigger. Right. So he comes from a juvenile detention center, eventually ends up in one, in also the accident thing, which is the middle part of the film. I put more emphasis on it, so it's more about trying to get the community together, etc. So, and then we were working on more and more to cut from the original story, cut up from the original story. So it helps, because before I was involved in a few films that had this fact base, and it's not helpful if people are sort of still alive, so they have their own story, that we were making a film about them. You have to be very aware to save your own film and not hurt anybody. So it always helps to be inspired more than just write something based on what really happened.
And I've never read the article or the story before working on the film.
Okay.
So I've never get any inspiration out of this story.
So you just sort of, a lot of it you built on through your own imagination?
Yeah, we wanted to make it truly out of the world that we are creating in the film.
That's nice. Yeah, and do you guys the juvenile facility, juvenile detention, that's an interesting setting. It's something we only see so much of in movies around the world. Did you do a lot of research or in regards to that?
We did. We were in Juvie, three
juvenile detention centers. In one, we had the possibility to stay overnight for 2 nighs. We had to pretend we were students we came there with a group of other students.
It's resocializations.
I don't have the word in English for that, but this is a studying, you have to go to spend time with inmates and stuff. So, but what we were trying to find was this sort of the vibrance of a character who is, before they're becoming adults, they're already fractured, and they have to there's nobody to sort of show them the way, but they're supervisors who are appointed by the state. So there's this intimacy when you're growing up. And that means the feeling of emptiness and abandonment, they were all having this, and it helped us very much so in sort of not understanding it, because this is a tough thing, right? But at least sort of spend time with them and look at what they do with their bodies, how their bodies react to being sort of alone all the time. The moment you start growing up, you really need supportance, and they didn't have it. So having all that. Also, I had a little bit of experience working for 12 years with, because I made a documentary like 12 years ago about teenagers coming out of addictions. And I work with a lot of, on a daily basis, I am in contact with a lot of psychologists on the matter. They helped us with this so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to talk about isolationism because there's definitely a lot of that here. I mean, you see the inmates, but they're kind of separate from one another, and sort of like you can see how psychologically damaging that could be, especially for your character, because your character has to re-enter the world.
Yeah, the separation is damaging by itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the weirdest part of detention centers is it's the separation. So taking out of society someone who needs society to recover, it's weird.
It must be, yeah.
Yeah, and especially they are separated also in the small community which they're creating, being in detention center. You know,
Yeah.
so it's basically a story afterwards of reconnecting with other people and reconnecting with yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting because either if it's in the detention center or in this small village, I mean, your character is kind of living life in a fishbowl in a sense. It's gone from one fishbowl to another. Because it's a small town, but it's a small town that is engulfed by grief.
Also engulfed by, basically mountains, right? Because we were shooting it, and I was trying to find a place which is entrapped and surrounded with something. So mountains sort of take out the horizon thing, and you don't have the perspective. Everything is already all the time covered. So this sense of rejection, not only in the first part when the main character leaves the detention center, but the rejection in people and the village is echoing with one another. So it helps to build this new meaning to the story of a guy coming from a rejection, getting into rejection, understanding rejection like no one else probably,
Yeah.
and trying to help them, knowing the therapies he was undergoing at the detention center.
Absolutely, yeah. That's definitely, I mean, I like how he sort of implements a lot of what he's learned in the detention center in this community, especially like the screaming therapy.
Yeah.
And there's something quite therapeutic about that screaming therapy.
Yeah. Primal scream.
Primal scream, yeah. Yeah, is that something that was like part of the research? Or did that come about organically?
Yeah, well, in the detention, like it's not generally addiction, addiction healing centers.
Right.
I was working in. As a filmmaker, I was documenting their journey. The primal scream sessions were usual. I mean,
It's also visually interesting.
Of course, it's like a primal scream thing.
It is.
It's better than sitting in a circle and talking about their problems.
Sometimes, yeah, it is. It can be much more effective sometimes.
And for example, also, and it's very theatrical at the same time. It's funny because my father is an actor and he runs workshops, and I was attending one of his workshops in which he took all the group of actors and he split them in two groups and made them scream at each other with certain emotions. So try to scream with love, like you crave for the other part, or try to scream with anger, like you're angry at something. So it was in relation with what I saw in the primal scream sessions at detention centers.
That's interesting, yeah. And you have a number of scenes, Bartosz, where you have to, convey a lot just with your eyes. And this is something I always like to ask actors, because that's a lot of the challenges where film acting is, in terms of communicating. How challenging was it, and how did you prepare for moments like that?
Like that, I was thinking, I was just
He was
trying to
pondering.
think, and I was trying to act accordingly to the situation, probably. No, it's, I wasn't thinking about those scenes that there is nothing to do, or I need to do it with a special part of my body. I was just trying to find myself in this situation, simply. It's how you. I was trying to listen. Listen and be aware of my surroundings, and that's also the part of Daniel in this film. He's like an animal, aware all the time, aware what's going on because he's in danger.
Yeah, the hit can come from any direction.
Any direction, anytime. So he needs to be aware. So from this awareness comes this. Maybe those eyes comes from this awareness, but it's. And if there is a scene that you need to play only with your presence, the only thing is to be aware for me.
Absolutely, yeah. Listening is key when it comes to acting.
And listening to your partner, basically.
Exactly, yeah.
Because it's not about me doing stuff; it's about me responding to the environment.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that you bring up an interesting point because your character is always knowing he's going to get revealed at some point, and it's sort of a question of how you do. Some characters, like in movies like this, they try to keep the act up to the very end, but your character's like, how do I approach the end of all this in a way that's still meaningful for the people? I mean, did that affect the narrative or inform it for you too in some way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think yes.
Yeah, well, it was pretty tough to design it beforehand because we had we have two stories in one film. One story is like two films in one. One film is about a guy pretending to be somebody else,
Right.
and the other film is about a fractured community trying to overcome the trauma, right? So the two films sort of suddenly overlap, and they start to communicate with each other, to try creating different meanings. So, for example, thanks to it, we have a meaning of like very absurd ones. A liar squeezes out the truth from people. A patient runs a therapy on people from the village. People who are rejected, they do not hesitate before rejecting somebody else.
Right.
So having all these meanings and Bartosz playing Daniel, who plays somebody else, you had so many layers. So we had to basically update ourselves every day, talking about like
where are we going
become
right now?
lost in it because it's such a nuanced thing. Like at the end, beforehand we were working with Mateusz, the scriptwriter, and we had like 27 different layers at the end of the film, which all had to be in harmony with each other.
Yeah, especially that we started to change a lot
Yeah.
in the script and in our approach and the characters during our work. So if you took one card out of this castle made of cards, you needed to replace all others. So we needed to be aware also about what we are doing right now and why we are doing it, because it can end up not well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because there are a lot of different layers. It's so easy to see how you could get lost in all of that, or how Daniel could get lost in all of that. He becomes such a part of the community that he can't just simply break free of it. I mean, he tries early on, but he realizes no, there's no easy escape.
Yeah, definitely. And he finds a community which actually notices him. Like he feels like nobody when he begins the film. We like the phrase that the film, the character begins with the film. Like before the film, there was no character. In this case, there is no backstory of Daniel. And, like there is one, obviously we know about it, but we don't show it in the film. So he develops during the film.
He does, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when we first see him out of the detention center going to the sawmill. I mean, he goes into the sawmill, he's going to be essentially a nobody because he's going to be like anybody else.
Like at the bottom of the ladder,
Exactly.
social ladder. and he did like he knows it's not for him. Like he knows like his, and then he hears the bells and he goes to the church because it's the only place he can find some, at least he can be he can talk to something. And then he's taken for the priest, and he doesn't say no. He gets into it, which is an absurd situation, but it will. And he's not a fool. He knows how it's gonna end. So it's probably something I was thinking about, and it touches me. This type of character, who knows that it's not going to end well for him, but it doesn't restrain him from getting into it and pursuing some noble, so to speak, goal. So he's he's pretty idealistic.
He is.
And Don Quixote-ish, knowing he's not going to win anyway. So he's buying his time, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, you can hear, there's a couple of scenes where you can hear the clock ticking rather ominously, which is great because it's just sort of a reminder of this can only last so long.
Great that you noticed.
Yeah, no, I just remember, there are scenes, film scores, music is great, but there are times where silence or certain noises speak volumes. And it's that the clock spoke volumes at that point, yeah. I also gotta say, there's a bit of ambiguity in this movie, which is kind of nice, and I don't know if we ever really get to see what the crimes that Daniel did. And in the ending of the movie, I don't want to give it away here, but it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. How much do you use ambiguity as a filmmaker? Is that something that
I think as for me, it's something I always look for.
Mm-hmm.
I love to see, like in real life, you have people who you perceived as victims, but they become perpetrators suddenly, and it's in life. Like you have a guy who at one point can be this goofy, foolish, maybe out of the box, stars like the TV personality, celebrity, but he becomes a president suddenly, and he governs you, and he, sketches the whole life ahead of you, and you have to go along with it, and it's life. And likewise, on the contrary, you have people you were with when you were growing up. They were your figures, and you were looking up to them. You had them, their posters on your walls in your bedroom, and suddenly, after many years, it turns out they were devilish and nightmarish, and you reject it.
Yeah.
But so everything this is life. So as a thing, I'm super interested and fascinated with the ambiguity of life itself, and the impossibility to sort of assess anything for certain. And if I have any possibility to show it in the cinema, that's my way.
That's great. How do you deal with that ambiguity? I think as an actor, you probably want to know everything about the character, even if it's not set in film, right?
No, to be honest, not.
Okay.
I'm very interested in what's coming to me during the process, simply. That's what Jan said. The very interesting part of building this character is that he's starting from the moment that he's on the screen. So he's a patchwork of everything what he saw and what he's learning right now, here and now. So he's a part of his stomach. He's a part of people who is meeting with.
He actually copy-pastes priest Father Thomas's sermon, right?
That's
at the very beginning. So he's creating himself. He's constructing himself again based on the faith and based on the new this new testament that Jesus left for him. It's like love your enemy simply, and he understood it literally. Like, okay, I need to love enemy as I love myself. Everyone. It's like that's all. That's the deal. That's what I'm gonna do. And he's trying his best
And he is, yeah.
He's like basically one day don't be a dick and okay, I'm not gonna be.
That's a great way of